welcome back to Beyond the Helmet. And that's hashtag BTH Pod if you're following on social media. I'm Steve McGrath, and today I am pleased to bring you a former All-American, national champion at Alabama, NFL player, but maybe most importantly, what he's doing now, having been an analyst for the Crimson Tide for the last 4 years, getting that behind-the-scenes look at how Nick Saban runs the operation from a coaching perspective. It's none other than Javier Arenas. Javier, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Steve, man. I appreciate you having me on. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you taking the time. Um, I know, so this is your first year not working at Alabama, having spent 4 years there as an analyst. I want to get into a lot of what you've been doing, but what are you doing now that you're finally able to take a break from being part of the powerhouse that's Alabama?
Yeah, so I'm not a part of the program anymore, but I'm still involved with football. And mentoring the youth. A lot of high schools around in the Hillsborough County area have allowed me in to come in and mentor their young teens, football players, not only athletes, but anybody within the student body who may need that guidance or that mentorship. So uh, I'm, I'm on my own schedule. I'm just a big ball of what I've learned, over the past, uh, I guess, 30 something odd years or 20 something odd years of my life, just my experience through football, through the hard work that it takes to balance football and school. And now I'm just throwing it back at the youth down here.
Yeah, so it's such a, very so few people get to have the college experience that you did, being such a prolific player on such a prolific team, have the NFL experience, go and have an idea of what it is to be on a championship staff as a coach and analyst. So it's awesome that you're giving back, but there's so many things to do. I think most people work for Alabama football so they can be a coach somewhere. Why? And of course, things can change, man. You're young. There's a lot of time, but why is the first step something more geared toward your mentorship and going back home?
Because it helps me focus specifically and just only on the kids, opposed to uh, just being quite frank and having to impress other people. When I got interviewed by, I think I interviewed maybe 4 times for defensive back coaching jobs and destroyed the board. I had fun, could have done it all day. Interviewed for 2 hours with Monty Kiffin when Lane was down at FAU. I think he enjoyed it a lot. They voted in a staff meeting after I left, and everybody raised their hand to hire me except for the defensive coordinator who hired one of his former players. And I went in there with a suit. I saw that guy who got the job walk past me because he was coming in after me. He came in with a jumpsuit on, and he's the one that got the job, and it was out of my control. I never played for the guy, so a lot of it has to do with that. And to me, that was just too much. I thought, look, if you're good, if you can coach, if you can influence, if you can guide, this should be easy. That is the case, but it does help to um, have relationships, which I had a lot of, but it was a lot more than just football, which I wasn't aware of, which I should have been prior to embarking on that coaching journey. So that's why now I get to just focus on the kids. I'm accountable, directly accountable for them. At Bama, as an analyst, you can't coach from a technical aspect. So um, it's a lot of, yeah, I want the responsibility. If a kid failed, God forbid, blame me. It's okay. I was never able to go through that on the good end or the bad end. A kid having success or a kid failing, getting the credit for either one. Because I want it. I want if he don't succeed, if he's struggling and it's my fault, I got to do better. I wanted that responsibility, and after 4 years at Bama, it was just, again, it was a lot more than that. You know what I mean? You're around the kids maybe 3 or 4 hours during the day, and you're just around the rest of the coaching staff for the rest of the day, and you're talking about 14-hour days, and which I didn't have a problem with, but now I'm around them all the time. During school, after school, during the summer. So that's why.
Yeah, but for you'd love to believe that everything's a meritocracy. Like it's truly the best rise up, the best get the opening. So to hear your story, um it's sort of it is what it is. That's one of those things where I don't think it's a football thing. I think it's just that's just a major hurdle in society. Is sometimes the people have inside tracks because they know the right people, and it's tough to hear that. But given what you're doing now, it sounds more like a blessing that maybe at the time you didn't realize because you want that job, you go in, you dazzle, but at least it puts you in a position now where seemingly you're going to be able to do more of what truly speaks to you, working directly with. And so I don't know what age kids are you working with, or what as you evolve and grow. But basically, sounds like your own business as a mentor, maybe even training kids as well. What's the target age group?
Um, it don't matter, to be honest. And I say that because I've accepted kids as young as 8 or 9 years old, all the way up to pros like Logan Ryan. Only had one opportunity to get my hands on him and train him, which was great. But every age, because I don't think it's too early for you to learn the fundamentals of the game, the right way. Um, you know, some people think it's too complex to teach a kid like the intricate details and the fundamentals of the game at such a young age. I like that challenge, so I welcome it. So all ages, man.
All right. Well, I want to ask a little bit about Coach Saban because you played there just as he's getting in, right? Things aren't looking too hot under Coach Shula. So what is it like? '07 his first year. Your sophomore year, '09. You're an All-American, undefeated national title run. The coach that you just worked with, how similar is that to the coach that you saw like 15 years ago as he was just putting his stamp on the Alabama football program?
I think it's very similar, and I think that's the reason for his success because he hadn't changed. He still works hard. Still know how to gain a relationship and recruit some of the best players in the country. But in terms of maybe a difference that I see, it's just the way he revolutionized, if you will, his X's and O's. It was pretty complex when I played, but now, we had a call for an example, like just say 7 mod was a quarters coverage, a form of a quarters coverage. That's what we had when I was there. And you either playing 7 mod versus 2x2, or you playing stubby or stump versus 3x1, and you just playing cover 7 out, which is stubby or stump on the 3-man side, and whatever mod on the back side versus empty. So again, that might sound like a lot, but that's what we did. Now that's just a part of a call. You know what I mean? To the point to where when I first got there, I would get frustrated because I'm like, is this necessary? Are we recruiting all of these like top tier athletes to slow them down? Because this is a lot. That's just one part of a call versus one formation, and then you get into maybe 2 or 3 other worlds based on if a guy sneeze or if he moved. You know what I mean? So, but I guess my point is that's the difference that I see from when I was with him the first time.
So X's and O's have evolved, but his approach is basically the same.
Oh my goodness, to the T. The cup of coffee, that he comes in the room with, to what time he get up there, what time he leave, to a T. I wasn't aware of the things that he did on a day-to-day basis outside of football practice because I was a player, and outside of practice and the meetings, that was the only time we spent time with him. But now, being up in the staff meetings and being around him more often, this was all new to me. So, but I'm pretty sure all of that is the same. But I'm telling you, man, like, when I was a player, I sat in the front row, and I meeting him, and he was a DB coach, and so he stayed in there with us when we dispersed with linebackers and the D line when we split up after uh, maybe 20 minutes of meeting as a team defense. But when he first come in there, I'd be sitting down. He'll have a styrofoam cup of his coffee from the prior day, cold. And I'm looking at it like, ew, this cat just leaves this here. and he comes in, pours his new cup of hot coffee in it, just start drinking. Like little things like that, it's consistent down to the detail. You know what I mean? So it was great to see, and I think that's a reason for a lot of his success. Not because he is drinking coffee the same way, but just the consistency and nothing changing.
Creature of habit.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's Alabama. So if we're going to break down what makes Coach Saban so successful, because so many different assistant coaches have come and gone during the tenure. He's the one mainstay, but success is always the constant. Is there anything outside of consistency that you can put your finger on as to why this is the most prolific program in recent memory?
Just outside of consistency, his knowledge of the game, but not only his knowledge of the game, but his knowledge of how to get players to peak performance in the toughest part of the game, like the fourth quarter. Uh, we started the game out smacking people in the mouth when I was there, and they still doing it for the most part. But we finished the game even strong. As the game went on, we got better. We built up, and that was all a result of the off season and how hard we worked. Like we died in the off season and came back to life is what we used to say. Like it was that hard. So we were in shape year round. Running sometimes 32, 110 yard, 110-yard sprints. Somebody's gonna quit, and if that person quit, we all got to run extra, and so it forced leadership, just little things like that. So when you get in the game, it's like, oh, thank goodness, it's a break, it's easy, it's not practice. You know what I mean? So I guess his approach, just his how to build a championship team. He tells you to act like a champion. He just have a lot of little nuances that a lot of coaches that I've been around, I've heard them say. So I think that's been a big part of it, to be honest with you.
So yeah, as much as I could ask questions about Coach Saban all day, we only have so much time. For the 4 years that you're there, there's so many coaches that come and go. It's, if a coach leaves a job or gets fired or someone's looking to resurrect their career, they try to get on the staff that you were just a part of. I mean, Bill O'Brien's a big time coach. When he needs a new place to get his career jump started, he goes straight to Alabama. I mean, time and time again, you had so many big name guys over the years that have gone to Alabama. Who jumps out to you as maybe just another coach, another analyst that was there, but as you start your career as being a coach and wanting to mentor younger kids, who sort of left the biggest impact on you? Or were you able to take anything away from some of these other lesser known coaches?
Yeah. I think Pete Golding. I learned a lot from him. He's maybe a couple years older than me, but very, very brilliant. Works very, very hard, and was a player himself. But just how he prepared and like the mental gymnastics that he went through, because he not only, what ultimately he's preparing for the game, but he also preparing to present to Coach Saban. If you want a call if you have a call that you really want to get put in on that particular week, you got to have every answer because the questions are going to be asked. And watch the way that he formed, the way that he prepared for a football team around having to answer those questions. Like, so look, I like this. I would like to do this. Well, are you going to be all right against the moon sweep or the stretch play because this team does it? Like he has those answers already. And just him caring about the kids and I'm a DB guy. I started out a DB guy when I was an analyst there, but the last year I worked with the inside backers for that very reason, because one, it was a new position, and two, I saw age wise and football savviness, if you will, and football knowledge, a little bit of me and Pete Golding. So I kind of attached to him a little bit. My last year, a lot of it actually, I spent the whole time with him, and just because I guess it's a completely different world when you're a coach. It's a completely different world. Like you got to carry yourself different, rightfully so, because you're a leader, whether you like it or not. And just to see how Pete was a little more. I was a player walking around those hallways when it came to giving advice and helping kids out and bringing them up to date on a game plan or explaining something to them. Like a coach should do. I was great at that, but I still would want to, around the complex, kind of shoot the shit with them, if you will, just because I felt like I was one of them. Well, Coach Saban was looking to see me separate that. I know that for a fact, and Pete helped me do that because he was, again, around the same age as me, and he can joke around with the kids, but it was always teaching subconsciously, and it's just always in coaching mode, if that makes sense. I get out of it sometimes just to kind of, that was my way of gaining a relationship with the kid, or rightfully so. But now being around Pete, and obviously more so being around Coach Saban, I know how to gain that relationship with them, but in a teaching role. You know what I mean? I don't have to stoop to their level, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but I don't have to, like, ask him if he's seen something on TikTok to find common ground. I can, if he brings up TikTok, I can look, man, the time that you spend it on TikTok, if you spend it on your craft, like just little things like that might seem like it comes easy, but I struggle with it a little bit, and just watching guys like Pete Golden, again, because of his age and how much he loved the game of football. I learned, how to balance that, watching him.
Well, I mean, I know that Pete was closer to your age, but I mean, when you look at Nick Saban's age, right? I mean that there's just a little bit of an experience gap between you and those guys. Like, I think it's all part of the journey, growing older, realizing what you have to do to get better. But to have guys like that to show you the ropes, I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. The whole thing's a process. So that's why I think it's so great that you had a chance to be in there for so long. But now that you get to do your own thing, work more directly with kids, now you get to put your spin on it, and then again, who knows where it goes from there. But if you decided to ever jump back to a different program, go back to Alabama, it's a journey.
No doubt about it.
So for you to do all this at Alabama, of course you played. So when you transitioned out of being a player, what was that like? Like what's the road to going back to Alabama as an analyst?
It was a scary road at first, because when I got done playing, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. It was new to me, just in terms of having all of this free time, and just expecting a team to maybe call, or just, and that never happened, and then coming to the realization that might not happen, and having to look ahead to, okay, what is it that I want to wake up every day and be excited to do, and it didn't take too long for me to realize, like, I still want to be in football. I still want to help the younger generation, and more importantly, I want to help them have success off the field, but on the field as well. And you do that teaching them the same things, and that's just mental toughness, perseverance, accountability, things like that. And just the thought of that as I sat on my couch, if you will, after I got done playing, really encouraged me, excited me a lot. So it was no time until I reached out to Coach Saban to come aboard the staff at Bama.
And it worked out.
Yeah.
Now, the toughest part about getting older and getting smarter and wiser is that you can look back at the path that was. You can say, with hindsight being 2020, should have done this, shouldn't have done that. When you, like, particularly now, because again, it's the Crimson Tide. I mean, you got to work with the best when it comes to game plan and just seeing that side of what what football is all about. Did you look back at your career as a player, and were you hard on yourself about things that you had done or didn't do, or what's that process like of learning this and seeing from the coach's side what's it all about, and then thinking about what you had done as a player? What is there anything that stood out to you as takeaways?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great question. And I think the most glaring thing would be when I first got to the NFL, being so mesmerized by finally making it to the mecca of football. I kind of got away from the things that got me there. the toughness, the hard work, the extra studying and grinding. I still did it, but not as consistent as I might have been at Alabama. And again, I was just so preoccupied with you play against Megatron. How am I going to get this guy covered this week? You know what I mean? And I think just keeping the game simple and not making it too complex, and just continuing to be on the fundamentals. Again, when I got to the NFL, I got away from that somewhat just because like at maybe 6 o'clock after we get done at 5 at the Chiefs facility, I'm wore out and I just want to go home. It wasn't like that every day, but that 1 or 2 days is an edge that another guy's getting against me. So at Bama, that was never the case. I loved being at that football complex, and there was nothing to be up there until the later hours in the afternoon or the evening, just trying to gain the edge. But when I got to the league, so when I'm sitting as an analyst at Bama now and just listening to Coach Saban go through staff meetings and what he's telling the kids after practice, yeah, that's when I started to think about those. I was like, why I should have just stayed. And I don't say it with any regret. Don't get me wrong. You ask a question, so I'm trying to provide the best answer possible. I would reminisce it or recollect, if you will, and I should have just every day, because it could have been 1 or 2 days that really, sent my career a little left for a short time, and which really just threw me off balance as a whole. And maybe I didn't, and that's what I think that was something that was glaring.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to imply that there's any regret, but it's just the unique position of starting the journey of becoming a coach. I'm sure that it at times would have to force you to sort of reflect on different aspects of what it was like, whether being in college or as a professional athlete. But one thing that stands out to me in your professional career is being traded. And I know that that's something that you had actually wanted and had requested. When you look back at, not did it work out, but what was it just that process like for you of getting to a point where you wanted to voice that to a team, and then just as a human being dealing with uprooting yourself, your family, moving to a different part of the country, learning these new coaches, this new playbook? What's that whole process like?
Just really, it all came about by just my belief in myself and just feeling like, Andy Reid and the new coaching staff, it didn't have much faith in me. And, I wouldn't, I, I wasn't entitled at that time, and I had no right to feel this way, but I felt like I have no patience for no one who don't have faith in me, because it's tough to go out there and fight, and it was just a distraction for me. But again, that was the wrong thinking at the time, so, I voiced that I wanted to be traded, and I got just what I asked for, a young cat making a dumb decision, essentially. But it was a huge part in who I am today. It plays a huge part in who I am today, because when a kid want to transfer a Bama, or if he, the game's kicking his butt and he don't know if he want to be in it anymore, I can lend my advice from, hey, look, this is the left turn that I took. And if it's another situation, hey, this is the right turn I took. But in that case, I would have kept my mouth shut, and I would have let the chips fall where they may, and just continue to believe and trust in myself. That's how I would have went about that different. But it went the way that it went. I got traded to Arizona. Uh, Initially, mind you, I wasn't the top DB in the NFL by any stretch of the imagination at the time. But I sure, the way that I was going about this, you would think I was. And I tried to deny the trade, which basically how that would have occurred is they traded me, which they did, and I just never went. And it would have forced them to cut me. And that's the route that I was going to take. Like, no, you're dealing me to a team who just drafted, who is Tyrann Mathieu now and was then, but I knew he was, going to end up being this type of football player. But that's a guy that you invest in, rightfully so. He's a dynamic football player, the same type of player that I was in the same division, and so they were forced almost to invest in him. Even forced or not, that's a guy you want to invest in. So it just wasn't the best situation. They had a guy over there named Gerard Powers, who's another nickel, even though he started at corner out there. So I wasn't running from the competition, but we talking business at this point. I'm on my third year. I'm on my fourth year, my contract year. So it wasn't the most ideal situation. But at the end of the day, I packed my bags, packed the family up. We moved out to Arizona, and it was one of the best things to happen to me, in the form of the friends that I already had out there that I was able to be around, the coaching staff and Bruce Arians, and the rest of his coaching staff, which goes without being said. It's a phenomenal coaching staff. And just having to adjust, for being forced to adjust, being forced to be uncomfortable. It really made me take a look in the mirror. So that was real tough, but I think it worked out for the better, just in terms of me developing as a man.
Definitely. Yeah, going through all that, you get those scars that kind of make you who you are. In the way that you're able to then, whether it's at Alabama or with any of the kids that you're working with now or will in the future, that's stuff that you can pull on to help give them advice, which is why I'm glad you're doing it. But you kind of started your answer there with, you didn't really have time for people that weren't really believing in you. Is that something that, did you develop that at that sort of mindset at Alabama, or is that something that you took from like early on? I'm just curious a little bit of, not that there's anything wrong with it, but when you come in with that mindset, is that something that you would sort of developed, or is that sort of basically who you were from being a little kid?
I think it was, it's always been with me since I was a little kid, just because of the work that I put in and how hard I play. And I think it's evident. And in that situation, meaning, when I say I have no patience for people who doubt me, essentially, I had, after 3 years, I built a pretty good nickel, at least good enough to have my position took, or start as a one, as I've been for the past 3 years, and compete. And if someone take my position, let that be the case. But I got bumped. I'm talking to the bottom of the depth chart, when Andy Reid first got there, and again, I guess it triggered that thought. Well, Kai has no belief in me whatsoever, and if I'm out here selling out in the form of the way that I play physically, putting my body in harm's way, play in, play out, for nothing basically, or beating on a dead horse, that don't sound appealing to me. You know what I mean? So that doubt, but you still got to go out and try to prove. And when I do prove, is it going to even do anything for me? That all of that rolled up in one, really had me standing strong on if you doubt me,
Yeah,
I have no pay. I want to be in a situation to where I can go sell out, mentally, devoting all of this time to football from a mental aspect and physically, and be able to reap the results from it, reap the benefits from it, good or bad. Yeah, I'm willing to take it, but I guess it's just it developed too, man. Because being around Coach Saban, the guy, that's why he's such a good coach as well. Is when he believes in you, when he trusts you. At least me, I went out there and I played on another level. I was kind of looking for that in the NFL. Kind of had it with Todd Haley, my initial coach, but after him, I felt like that wasn't the case anymore. So I was at my breaking point basically when Andy Reid got there, and just kind of threw me to the wayside.
So, not to necessarily get too psychological on it, but if you really felt that way with Saban, and that's All American. You really flourished for you in Alabama. Was that something that you were kind of always seeking, someone to kind of give you that confidence? Like, just thinking through, like, not even necessarily you as a player, but just you as a person. Like, did you need that? Did you get that in high school? Do you get that, earlier on? Because sometimes when I look at it, it's like, well, if that's what sort of jump started you, was that something that you had kind of always been seeking, or would it just sort of be a magical mix at the right time?
Nah, it was something I was always seeking. You know, when Coach Saban first got there my sophomore year, I heard that he didn't like short corners, and you know he got there and it was tough, and you know I was like a third string nickel, and I'm talking out there balling. You know, one hand interceptions in practice, two of them in the same practice, and this is a particular practice that counts. After this scrimmage on Saturday, the depth chart really starts to develop, and I'm again just balling out. And after that scrimmage, still being third on the depth chart. Again, this is when Coach Saban first got there. I went to his office and told him I want out, like I want to leave. Um, and he started grabbing all his papers, like, "What? You want to leave?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And what I told him, because you couldn't just transfer at that particular time, the coach had to let you go. He had to release you. Um, but he got a little out of whack, and why would you want to leave? And I'm like, I just don't want to play anymore. I just, want to go somewhere and get my degree. Again, that was to get him to release me so I can go play at another school. Nowadays, I could just tell him that I don't want to be here. I want to go play for somebody else, and I could do that. Um, but again, so he gave me 2 days off of training camp. Like, hey man, just go think about it. And the reason why I think he was trying so hard to keep me there is because of my punt return ability. Um, but I was more than a punt returner, and so I took 2 or 3 days. I thought about it. I called Eric Vance. He was a former player, played at Vanderbilt, also played at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was a mentor of mine. My mom, obviously. And after those 2 days, and I went back to Coach Saban, I sat in front of him and verbatim, I told him, I said, "Look, Coach, I'm gonna stay here, but the only reason why I'm gonna stay here is so my mom don't have to drive 10 hours to pick me up from school." I was one of the first people, one of the two first people to go to college out of my family. And I didn't want. I remember the 10-hour drive up there. It was a once in a lifetime experience. I didn't want her to, after 2 months, turn around or excuse me, not 2 months, but a year and a few months, uh, turn around and have to come pick me back up. So I said, I'll just stick this out. But I don't want that to happen. I don't want my mom to have to come pick me up from college. So I just get my degree, stick this thing out. And from that point on, I think he saw something in me, because when I walked out of the meeting room that day, I was basically a starter from that point on. I don't know if it was he knew I can play, but he just didn't play short corners. But that extra little oomph that I gave, just in terms of how much this means to me, uh, I think it turned the table for me. And that I can do no wrong. I can go out there and drop a punt. He'll come. I come to the sideline. He'll smack me on my butt, and say good job. So I've always been like that. I don't know.
All because you couldn't face mom.
Right.
Oh, that's great. So you mentioned he really liked you as a punt returner. Just you, because I know you were a good track athlete in high school. How did you feel about managing the responsibilities, punt return, kick return versus playing defensive back? Did you feel in the NFL that they try to like typecast you as only being one versus the other? How did you see yourself when you thought about what you were first and foremost?
I needed to be a good corner, in order to return punt. That's how I saw it, because I'm out there already for the first few downs, and on fourth down, you get to go back there and return the punt. My freshman year at Bama, I just started at punt return, so I'm just sitting on the sideline, first, second, third down, all cold and muscle stiff, and then it's fourth down. You got to go out there and all of a sudden, be at your best. And that was a little tough. But I still got it done. I still had two punt returns my freshman year. But it's a lot easier when you're out there competing as a DB. And it's tough to do that playing DB. But the reward is on fourth down. Now I have the ball in my hands. Now you guys have to try to tackle me. So I always saw, to me, it went hand in hand, but I always saw myself as a DB first, just because of the ratio of plays, basically, that it entails. You playing 3 snaps on defense, 1 snap as punt returner. I'm not going to be a starter at both and just say, hey, look, I'm a punt returner and then a DB. No, I'm playing 3 snaps. I'm not giving it my all. and I'm being very effective. I'm a DB first, man. On fourth down, I'm a solid punt returner.
Yeah, for sure. I have to ask about returning though, but particularly punts. Um, how much is it vision, and how much is it you need to have the moves to make people miss?
Um, I think that's a great question. That's a hard question to answer. Um, I think it's about vision, and I'm saying that I heard Devin Hester say that, a guy who I played with in Atlanta for a year, and of course he's right, right? He's Devin Hester, but it helps me uh, clear this answer up and say how I want to say it, because it is vision. You could be as quick as you want, but once you're making one person miss, if that second person's right on you after that, and you can make so many people miss. When you see what it is that you won't have to make a lot of people miss. I can just start this way, sell a return this way, stick my foot in the ground all of a sudden because I see and know where I want to go. And I just have to hit it like I need to hit it. If I'm back there just, old school backyard, uh, smear the queer, whatever the game, throwback tackle, trying to shake each, and no, it's not going to work, especially when you get to the college level, and most definitely when you get to the professional level. So you have to have vision. You got to have quicks to go along with that too, of course.
Now, I had brought up, we talked a lot about the Alabama coaching staff, but as we get toward the end here, I just want to, you had mentioned Coach Haley. Obviously, Romeo Crennel takes over in Kansas City while you're there, but Bruce Arians, like you mentioned, Mike Smith in Atlanta, just to name a few. And of course, Emmett Thomas, the great Hall of Fame corner, who was the defensive backs coach when you got into the league. When you think about you being now a mentor to kids and a coach, what do any of those, or maybe someone else from the NFL experience in particular, do you draw from? Does anyone stand out as being the most influential on you, or are there certain principles that that really stick with you, all these years later? Not all these years, it hasn't been that long.
Yeah, because you calling me old, bro. No, you know, it wasn't the guys who I was around in the NFL that I pull from now that I'm in a position, in a leadership position. It's been guys who I've come across in my 4 years trying to become a coach. It's obviously Coach Saban. That's by default almost, but guys like Mike Tomlin, I had the opportunity to do a 2-week internship with him, and the way that he ran, the way he balanced being a player's coach and being a firm, no BS type coach, I really admired that. I saw a lot of myself in him. So it wasn't the guys that I was around when I was playing. It was like that during those 2 weeks, watching how Mike T run that organization, it was good for everybody. Like if I put myself in the player's shoes, I loved it. I was like, I would love a coach like this. I had my coaching shoes on, so at that particular time, and I loved the way he ran his building or his football team as a coach. So he, to me, he um, satisfied everybody in the sense of uh, like at practice, a lot of competition periods. Like as soon as they start out practicing in Pittsburgh, it's like 2-point plays. You got the 3-yard line is live, you know, full speed tackling and everything. Um, and as a player, I love that because I want to practice this situation over and over because it's gonna come up. I don't want to walk through this situation, like Coach Saban would do. Again, obviously not knocking him because he does things his way and they work perfectly. But I just think and they you obviously talk about two different beasts. You talk about the NFL, you talk about
Sure.
college, but just I guess Tomlin's age and his his firmness. But like Coach Saban, he gonna call a meeting if somebody messed up. He gonna call you in there if you messed up. He gonna chew you out. He gonna make sure you understand, like your dad, Mike Tomlin, just holds you accountable. Like, or let your teammates hold you accountable. He does it a different way, but I think everybody, like on the coaching staff, you can see that's the way that should be handled. As a player, you're like, yeah, yeah, we need to let him know that this is not okay. Um, and so I like to pull from the Mike Tomlin version of that, just because these kids nowadays are so different, completely different generation you're dealing with. Um, I'm trying to use the right word when I describe the way that Coach Saban goes about it. That one way or my way or the highway mentality does work for him perfectly fine. I, it didn't. I didn't see myself being that type of coach. So to answer your question, one guys that coached me, though, watching some of the things that Emmett Thomas taught me, and just years later realizing like he knew Carson Palmer was going to throw that hitch route when he did one particular thing. I didn't see it at the time. I just knew he kept working on it all week. And then come Sunday, Brandon Flowers got a pick six in Oakland. He put his foot on the ball in the end zone, and he's flexing. I'm like, ET knew all week that was coming. So just you know pulling up. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I do pull for from some of the guys that coach me, but I think overall, as a whole, it's like guys like Mike Tomlin, these young new coaches that I kind of pull from. That's why I refer to Pete Golden as a guy that I latched on at Bama. Um, again, I learned from a lot, like Romeo, his poise and his calmness in the moment of chaos. I learned that from him. But I think I got, because I was mature enough after I got done playing, and I was in the leadership role, and I had to learn a lot fast. And so that's where I kind of look to, like the Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, and I appreciate that long answer. It's a loaded question, not intentionally, but ET is a positional coach, so like you're not going to be looking at him for leadership. You're going to do exactly what you just said. Look to him for the specifics on how to coach up DBs, what keys to look for. Very different skill set than how do you run an organization, which is what you were really trying to gain from being around Coach Tomlin. But of course, you're going to pull from different people. It's just natural by being in the same building as them and working with them day in, day out. I thought your answer made complete sense, but it's just not necessarily fair to lump positional coaches with head coaches. It's just, and comparing professionals to college level, it's just a different person that you're trying to coach. So it's that was a lot to work through. Is basically what I'm getting at. No, I want to get you out on the gauntlet, but I have one last question for you. And it's basically, what motivates you today? You don't have to coach. And if you really wanted to be related or involved with football, you could easily join a staff on, a D2 or D3 college football program, a high school program, and you could coast. Like you could do what you want, maybe not what you want, but you could be involved in the game with minimal effort if that's really all you wanted. But you're choosing what I see as a more difficult path, which is establish yourself, establish a brand, whether it's you're owning and operating your own gym, you want to be known as a mentor and you're working with schools to help kids. You're choosing a difficult path to make a difference. So I want to ask point blank, man, what motivates you to take the harder road to what I ultimately think is going to make a greater difference and help the most amount of kids?
When kids come up to me, or people in general come up to me and say, man, I loved you at Bam. I used to love you, my favorite punt returner. You're the reason why I return punts nowadays. It lets me know the impact that I did have on a lot of people when I wasn't trying to. I was just, doing what I do best. And it let me know that I can't do this on my own. I've done enough, I've showed enough, and who I am is good enough to consistently be responsible for helping mold the next generation, essentially. I have full trust. I have full trust and faith in that. So that's ultimately why I don't need anybody else to do it. Yeah, you do need help. So that's why I spent those 4 years at Bama. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, disqualifying that. But ultimately, I knew, on my own, and me being fully and totally responsible for the group of kids that, I was mentoring. I relished that moment. I relished the good and the bad in that. And again, just a kid come up to me, hey, he's like, man, I watched your YouTube highlights, or yeah, he said, oh, my dad, we named our dog, just little minute stuff like that, but it goes a long way because it's just a reminder of the impact that I had on lives, and I want to continue to do that.
That's awesome. And did you have anyone like that when you were younger, a particular mentor, someone that really helped you?
Yeah, a couple of guys behind you actually. Like I don't know if he's up there, but Barry Sanders, but more close to home. Um, just guys like Dwight Smith, who's a small uh, safety for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, had 2 interceptions in the 2002 Super Bowl, I think it was, when Tampa played against Oakland out in San Diego. I got a chance to go in the Bucks locker room coincidentally when they were playing the Chiefs. This was my first time going to the NFL game, and after the game, my friends, mom was in the military, so we got on the field. After the game, we went into the locker room to see these guys up close. Um, yeah, so I didn't spend a lot of time with them, but I was that type of guy. You give me one thing and I like it, and I think it's gonna help me have success. I'm taking it. I'm running with it. Excuse me. I'm running with it, and I'm gonna remember it. It wasn't. Well, I didn't have anybody coming once a week to the school to mentor me. I had to just take, pluck, and pick, and form the image that I wanted to be ultimately who Javier was. So it was a lot of people that again, Barry Sanders, guys like Dwight Smith on the defensive side of the ball because he was in Tampa. Just a lot of people, man.
Yeah, well, now I know why you didn't want to call your mom. It wasn't just like, oh, it's mom. She's in the military. I'd imagine that's not someone that you want to disappoint.
No question about it.
Sure, she was tough. Is tough. Um, well, man, I want to get you out here on the gauntlet. So I got a couple quick questions for you, Javier. What is most important? Is it having the number one offense or the number one defense?
Defense wins championships.
All right. Pre-game ritual. Is there anything that you had to do before the game as a player or even as an analyst?
Um, I will say this. I'll say just seeing the arena in which you're about to go out there and compete and battle in. So like walking around the stadium, throwing a football out there, just where you about to, you know, go and get down, if you will, where you about to go put in a lot of work and just becoming familiar with the territory, that you're about to go to battle in. So just really just walking the stadium and spending time on the field before the game.
Now, players or scheme, which is most important in winning?
Players, but I think scheme is just as important. But since I have to answer, I'm gonna say players. You got Megatron. I'm sorry, you got Megatron on your team. That's a player, right? It's gonna help you win.
So, sure, and I was going to say a very conflicted answer, which is how everyone always answers this. Is with some exceptions, some people outright say players, but very, very rarely do I get an answer that's just scheme, no question. Those guys generally played for Coach Belichick. Well, man, last question, and I think it's most important. At the end of the day, obviously you're going to be working a lot with kids, and I say kids very loosely, but obviously like high school and younger. If you had to boil down, what would you give as the best piece of advice right now on how to achieve success?
If you work hard and you focus on you, not on anybody else, whether it's sports, whether it's in a career field that you're embarking on, if you focus on you and just try to be the best version of yourself and always take things serious and go as hard as you can, you can apply. So if it's football in the first phase of your life that you're applying those things to, you should have success, as much success as I guess God will let you have, if you will, not to get religious. But when that's over with, when it's time to enter the real world after you've been playing football at most of your life at that point, and this is a new experience and you're feeling kind of lost, just take and apply those same things. So I guess ground yourself or create your foundation and um, and just work ethic and just love for whatever it is that you're doing. So when you want to switch lanes, look, I'm switching. I got the same vehicle, I got the same engine. I'm just switching lanes, so you don't have to. Because if I'm just a football player, I'm focused on being a good football player, um, and a flashy, like flamboyant. Not that there's anything wrong with guys that were like that, because a lot of greats were like that. But I'm talking about for me. But when I get out of that, um, that's not necessarily going to guarantee success as a doctor. You walking in there swagged out as a doctor. No, like I'm coming here to get work done. I'm coming here to get down to business. That transfer uh, to any platform when you ground yourself in that foundation, just pure hard work, finding the love for what it is that you do, and just commitment. I think that would be the best advice for young players or young people in general trying to have success.
I love it. And one bonus question. I thought that I had read that you were related to Gilbert Arenas, and certainly your brother played football. How competitive was it growing up? I don't know if you are close to Gilbert at all, but I'd imagine that you're pretty close to your brother. Growing up, any interesting sports competition stories?
Um, Between me and my brothers, a lot. I got two younger twin brothers. I got a brother who's a year and a half older that played cornerback at Nebraska and played in the NFL for a year and played in Canada for maybe 3 years. So it would be him, and out of the two twins, one of them was a little heftier than the other. So since he was older, my brother that went to Nebraska, he got the heftier twin. Like so to balance this thing out a little bit, I got that more athletic one. And I'm talking about we had some goal line. We snapping the ball. After you snap it, you go out for a pass. We try to put games together as best we could. So it was a lot of good battles in those games. Uh, but with Gilbert answering that question, um, let ESPN tell it back in 2008 and 2009. We were real tight cousins. I've never met Gilbert. Uh, I think he's my cousin. Look, that's not anything that you would think I would go research it, but my mom, she told me that look, that is your cousin, uh, and but I've never spoke to him, and neither of us have ever reached out, but we acknowledge each other at the same time. He was an awesome basketball player, and I like to say that it's in blood, just in terms of the brazenness out there on the court and on the football field. But we are related, but distant, if you will, which is no issue at all. Got a lot of love and respect for him.
Sure, sure. Well, and I can just picture the 2-on-2 battles. Man, your mom must have had her hands full.
Man, for real.
Well, in closing, I know that you're on Twitter and you're on Instagram at Javier Arenas 28 on Instagram and Twitter. Is it at Javier Arenas 28 as well, or is that 21
That's 21 on Twitter.
on Twitter?
Yeah.
Well, man, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Man, thanks for having me.